weapons of Blitzkrieg yesterday. Obviously, air power is the big thing. Now, this gun pictured here is a German 88. Okay, I'll read this to you here in a second. I walked into the museum and I saw this and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's an 88. I teach about that, okay, because it's one of the most important weapons of the war. So let me read this. The German Flak 37 88 millimeter dual purpose gun. The 88 flak gun is one of the most famous guns of World War II, originally designed as an anti-aircraft gun. Okay, so if you look here, guys, the effective ceiling is 26,000 feet. So if you're trying to shoot down an airplane from the ground, so say I get this World War II grenade right here, and I launch it 25,000 feet in the air, and there's an airplane flying, and it blows up. The metal from this is going to fly out at high rates of speed, causing what's called flak. If that metal goes into the engine or the cockpit, killing the pilot or knocking the engine out, then you bring down these planes. Most countries don't have these anti-aircraft guns. The 88 shell is 88 millimeters round. It's big. It's about that round and it's about that long. Okay, now Mr. Menestrina, the substitute, he has one of these shells. Okay, yeah. Okay, it's big. Okay, so listen. Originally designed as an anti-aircraft gun, flat trajectory, the high muzzle velocity, and the range of this gun also made it the best anti-tank gun of the war. Allied soldiers, our guys, faced and feared this gun in every campaign in North Africa, Mediterranean, and the European theaters. It was responsible for the great number of casualties suffered by both tank and air crews. Of the 88 millimeter gun, the late Stephen Ambrose, who's a historian, wrote this: those 88s became a legend. It was said that more soldiers converted to Christianity by the 88 than by Peter and Paul combined. Guys, this gun was devastating. So later we'll talk about the Battle of the Bulge that takes place in the forest, okay? The Germans could get these shells to go off in the treetops. And when they exploded in the trees, in the dense forest, splinters of wood are going to fly out at high velocity, and those will go into human flesh, you understand? We had 81,000 casualties in the Battle of the Bulge, mostly because of this thing. You fight a war in the desert against the Germans, and they're launching these shells against your tanks. These things hit the sand, guys. I mean, it's like sending out 1 million shotgun pellets. You understand? I've stood on the beach as a hurricane approached, okay, in like 60, 70 mile an hour winds on the beach, and it picks up the sand. You understand? And it pelts your skin. It hurts, okay? And imagine being next to one of these explosions in the desert, okay? So I just, not to glamorize a weapon, but it's an important weapon and very effective, okay, that the Germans had. All right, so moving forward, we're going to move in today what's called the Phony War, and that's going to last about 6 months. Okay, this slide is going to take us through the invasion of Western Europe. Okay, we all know Hitler's grand plan is to take Russia, but he can't leave his western flank open while he goes east into Russia. So he's got to take care of Western Europe. So for 6 months, there's no fighting in Europe. Now, there's some air battles, there's bombing going on, there's some sea battles, but there's no fighting on the soil of Europe. So they call it the Phony War. So the Poles are defeated by October. So for this next 6 months, Hitler's going to use his Autobahn, railroads to move his troops back across Germany from Poland and prepare for the invasions of Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and eventually France. Now, guys, this is pretty shocking. I've got 6 countries up there. France will be the last to fall after roughly 9 weeks. He will take 6 countries in 9 weeks. He will take France in 2 weeks. What the Germans couldn't do in 4 years in World War I, they will do in 2 weeks. Guys, this is the power of blitzkrieg, okay? And so once you're done with these notes, I'm going to put my map back up here and walk you through that, okay? I will go into some detail. I'm not going to go into great detail, guys. You got to pick and choose what you spend time on. I'm spending too much time on a lot of this stuff anyways. Okay. So I don't mean to gloss over some of this, but I have to. Okay. Now, pictured here, okay, on the next slide, I don't have it written on there, but on the map, I'll write it on there. This is a remnant of the Maginot Line, which is a defensive barrier for the French. Of course, Winston Churchill here, okay, who I'm a huge fan of, okay. This is a fantastic photograph. I mean, he's wearing the pinstripe suit, with the cigar hanging out, and he's got the Tommy gun, you know, like the gangsters used to, okay. Classic. Now, this photograph was published in newspapers all over the world, and it's a frightening photograph. To see Adolf Hitler standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. Now, guys, just a few weeks from this photograph, you could possibly imagine Hitler taking another photograph like this in front of London Bridge and Big Ben in London. And maybe not too far out, Hitler taking a similar photograph in front of the Statue of Liberty in New York. This is scary stuff, okay? France falls in 2 weeks. I'm going to tell you a little story real quick that I didn't tell the other classes. I just kind of forgot about. Was when World War I ended on the 11th day, 11th hour, 11th month, 1918, Germany signed their surrender inside of a railroad car, okay? The French took that railroad car and they built a monument, the railroad car there, that signified the end of World War I. So when the French surrender, Hitler will force the French to sign their surrender in that rail car. And Hitler is riding high. There's video of him outside this rail car just like, you know, we paid him back. Okay, it was always about the Treaty of Versailles, how it was a stab in the back to the German people, and they just took France in 2 weeks. Okay, so Hitler's like, he's on the moon, man. Okay, all right. So let me walk you through this on the map. Is that one of those that you could like push up and down? I need to get to a slide. Oop, there we go. Okay. You guys know where all the countries are, okay? So this is by October 5th of 39, Poland is divided. Okay, so Got the Autobahn, railroads, so forth, move his armies back across. Okay? Now, a couple of things here. Remember, this area here that was a demilitarized zone is called what? The Rhineland. Okay, important to remember. Okay, the Netherlands and Belgium, and then you got Luxembourg here. Okay, now if I were to draw a bunch of dots on this map, what would that represent? No. You're looking at a map, got a bunch of dots on it. No, not towns and cities. There are towns and cities there, but no. I mentioned it earlier. This is part of visual learning. I'm delaying before I tell you the answer. I can let you work through it. Okay, I give up. The forest. To be more specific, the Ardennes forest. Okay, now guys, we live in Kansas. Okay? You don't know what a forest looks like. No, you don't. I mean, we are talking dense. Okay, and because this forest is so dense in southern Belgium, the French don't believe that the Germans can penetrate. You can't drive a mechanized army through the forest like that. Have you ever heard of German engineering? They're pretty good at it, okay? And German engineers are going to clear a path through the forest, just with explosions and different machines that are able to cut through. And then they're going to build pontoon bridges across the rivers and let streams. It's mountainous, it's hilly, it's forest, it's heavy forest, okay? This is where the Battle of the Bulge is going to be fought in 1944, late 44 and into 45 in the wintertime, okay? Late in the war. Biggest battle of the war in the United States, 1944, 45, okay? Now, that's here, okay? Hitler's going to go through there. Now, the French have been preparing for this day since World War I was over. And they have built a 350-mile line of defenses here called the Maginot Line. Maginot, Maginot Line. Okay. About time for a new one of these. Okay. Now, the French thought this line was impregnable. Now, you guys know anything about this Maginot Line? It's not imaginary, it's real. It's built into the ground. All along this 350 miles, most of it is underground. And so like turrets literally pop up out of the ground and can destroy tanks with artillery. Okay, it's pretty cool. They actually built like a railroad underground. It's not a full-size railroad like you would see in the subway, but it's smaller. But you can move troops from one part of the line to the other with this underground railroad. They've got tunnels and all kinds of stuff. They've got barricades. They've got dragon's teeth. You guys know what dragon's teeth are? Well, barbed wire, they have some of that. Okay, let's say you're going to try and drive your car into the front of Target, like drive into the front of the building. You can't. Why? They've got those big cement balls, yes, that are painted red. You hit that, your car's going to stop. So you build concrete dragon's teeth, okay, like this, and here, and here, and here, and you can't drive a tank through it. You follow me, okay? So dragon's teeth were used a lot. So the French, hey, they're sitting safely behind their Maginot Line. Now, they don't extend the Maginot Line along the border with Belgium. And they don't along the forest either because they don't think the Germans can go through the forest. Okay? So why would you not extend this all the way up to the coast? I know why. Because that would be offensive to the Belgians. Why are you going to put up a defensive barrier against one of your allies? And by the way, Belgium, guys, is neutral. The Germans would never invade through a neutral country, would they? Oh, wait a second. They did in World War I. It was called the Schieffelin Plan, named after the general that drew up the plan to go through the Low Countries of Netherlands and Belgium. History repeats itself. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself because Denmark is going to be first. April 9th, phony war ends because Germany invades Denmark. All right, I'm taking bets. How long before the Danes surrender? We got a couple hours. How many is that? 2? Couple's 2, right? What else we got? You got 5 hours? Anybody else?
I think over.
Over? Oh, come on. 1 day, 24 hours. Huh?
A week.
A week.
12 hours.
6.
Ooh,
6 hours.
6 hours. I think the over.
The Germans are going to do something. I might be wrong in this, but I don't think it's ever been done before. They are going to have soldiers jumping out of perfectly good aircraft. We call these people what? Yeah, paratroopers. Yeah, I think this is the first time they're used in war. I don't think they did this in World War I. No, that would have been crazy, right? Okay. It's still crazy, right? If you guys go skydiving, God bless you. Not doing it. Okay? No way. Did you hear about the guy? There was like a Friday night football game in Tennessee. Okay. It happened last week. Well, he's not alive anymore.
It's flat.
Yes.
In the Tennessee game?
No. It's a high school game.
Oh.
Friday night.
Did he make it through the goalposts?
That's wrong. Wrong.
Touchdown to a whole
Yeah, someone wrong.
If I'm gonna die, I gotta make it at least through the goalposts.
Okay. Stop. All right.
Make
Guys,
it downfield real
paratroopers. Okay. There you go. Okay. Now, then there's Norway. Okay. There's a king of Denmark at this time. That they go to the presidential palace. They go to they drop troops in there and they like take over. And the Danes are like, we can't defend ourselves. Okay. We might as well not fight. And Hitler actually, he's grateful for this. So the Danes will be able to continue to run their domestic affairs as they please, for the most part. They'll be a puppet, of the Germans. They'll occupy Denmark, but they won't have to leave a lot of troops behind to occupy it. They basically, have them. They got them. Okay. Then Norway. Now the Norwegians are going to fight. In fact, the British and the French will send some troops to Norway. Now, if you look at geographically, guys, Norway is important here, especially to the British Isles. Coming? So, along the North Sea here, okay, there's a lot of ports, there's airfields, and so forth. Now, if the Germans want to, get into the Atlantic with their submarines and so forth, they could go through the English Channel, but it'd be easier to avoid the British by going around the North Sea. Okay, so the Germans want to control this. The British don't want that to happen. Obviously, the Norwegians don't want that to happen. The Germans will send in, there's going to be some naval battles here. You're going to send in destroyers. The British, there'll be some sea battles. Both sides will lose ships. They'll use paratroopers here again. They will bring in merchant ships filled with soldiers. So if they came in at night, pulled this big ship into the port, German troops come out, take over the port. Okay. The fighting here would last weeks. Germany would subdue Norway. Now, there is resistance in Norway for the rest of the war. I mean, in most of these countries, guys, there are people that are like, screw these Germans. Let's kill them. You know what I mean? Like resistance. There's a good movie. It was on Netflix. It's called Max Manus. And it's named after the leader of the Norwegian resistance. Okay, and what he would do is go over to Britain on a boat, get explosives, dynamite, TNT, C4, okay? And then they'd sneak in at night and attach these explosives to German ships and try and blow them up. They did this over the next 4 years. He never got caught, okay? Max Manus. All right, pretty cool story that I didn't know about until I watched the movie. You know what I mean? So, Norway, Denmark, and then the Sheepman plan here. Okay, so as we talk about this, now all of Norway will not be occupied. A lot of it will. Sweden, if you're wondering, Sweden is neutral, but they continue to trade with Germany. Okay, so Germany's not going to invade Sweden. What about Finland? What happens to Finland? We're talking about these Norwegian countries. No. Who's going to invade Finland? Russia. And this is called the Winter War. Now the Finns are going to fight, and they're going to fight admirably. In fact, they will hold off the Soviets. Okay, they're used to this weather up there in Finland. Okay, so are the Russians. Okay, but if you talk to Mr. Davidson, okay, he's kind of a historian on this Winter War. In fact, he owns a Finnish rifle from that war. Okay, him and Mr. Ministrania, right? They're buddies. Okay, that guy, his collection is absurd. I'm telling you. I have the World War II grenade. That's the extent of my World War II artifacts. Okay, I've been in his house. His basement, I mean, it's just like racks of uniforms, German, American, Japanese. I mean, he's got all of it, man. And then helmets, guns, weapons, different types of weapons. It's incredible. I mean, everybody's got to have a hobby, I guess. But I don't even have a man cave. I can't even have one of those, let alone like World War II's in my basement. Jeez. Okay. Impressive stuff. Okay, so paratroopers and blitzkrieg guys. Okay, now during the Phony War, that 6-month period, the British started sending troops over to France to help defend her. Okay, the French are sitting smugly behind their Maginot Line. Okay, here's Paris. Okay, so I'll show you some other maps of this, but the Germans will penetrate the Maginot Line. Okay, they will cut through the forest. And what they're going to do when they cut through the forest is they're going to go to the coast. You come through, go to the coast, and fan out and take Paris. Okay? Now, the British and the French, the British are in here. And so they're going to try and counterattack into Belgium. But that's not going to go well. Guys, the Germans start bombing cities in the Netherlands and Belgium. When you bomb cities and towns, you create refugees. People that are going to flee this war. Now, are these refugees going to flee back towards Germany or towards France? Towards France. Hundreds of thousands of them fleeing the war. The German army is coming fast, and they're bombing. So you grab everything you can. You got your horse and your little, wagon, whatever it is, and you're trying to go towards France. And there's only a couple of roads, that go in and out of France and Belgium like this. And so you got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees. And what the Germans did, and this is a brutal tactic, when a car would come down the road, people would move off the road so the car could pass. Yes? Well, anytime refugees got off the road, German fighter planes would come along and strafe the ditches, like forcing people back on the road. They trained them. You get off the road, you're going to get shot at. So as the British come in, and they only get a few miles, and they're met by all these refugees that won't get off the road. Okay? By then, here comes Blitzkrieg. They're coming. So the British are going to have to retreat. The French are getting their butts kicked in here. And next thing you know, they're all going to be pushed back to the coastline right here at a place called DunKirk. Okay? And so their backs are against the wall. Their backs against the sea. There's nowhere to go. So I want to point two things out. I've already talked about the importance of air superiority, right? You control the skies, you have the upper hand. Okay. The other thing you gotta have in warfare is supply lines. If you cannot keep your supply lines up with your army, and this is where the Russians ran into trouble in Ukraine. Because when they first went into Ukraine, they advanced quickly, but then their supply lines got cut. And they couldn't resupply their men with food and ammunition and more men. The Germans are moving so fast here that their supply lines can't keep up. So there is a pause. About 24 to 48 hours. The British have an opportunity to pull these men off the beach. Okay? At DunKirk. How many of you guys saw the movie? Okay. And as I tell people, like, I was so excited about this movie when it came out. I'm like, dude, talk about it. It's all in my notes. And then I go and watch it. And I think it's a fantastic movie. But I'm thinking to myself, if you don't know the backstory here, you don't know what the hell's going on in this movie. There's no hardly any dialogue. So if you don't know the backdrop, you just see a bunch of troops on the beach. You don't know what the hell's going on hardly. Did you kind of feel that way? Like, I'm not really sure what's going on here. So I told my students, I'm like, hey, read about this a little bit first, find out, because then you kind of get it. Okay, now after this lecture today, you watch the movie, you're going to know exactly what's going on. Okay, so let me get back to the notes here. And I've got a couple of good maps of the invasion that you'd be able to see. If I can find my mouse, doggone it. This is a problem. Anything to add? There you are. Yeah. So you can see here the Maginot Line, okay? About 350 miles long. This is where the Ardennes Forest is, over here, okay? Same, different map, but same situation. Here's the Maginot Line here, okay? The Ardennes. Germans are going to cut through. The British are going to try and counterattack, okay? That's not going to work. British and French troops are going to be pushed back here to DunKirk. Here again, you can see cut through the Maginot Line, go to the coast, fan out, and this is where the French and British troops are captured, or could be captured, or killed. Now, guys, there's 200,000 British troops on the beach. This is the bulk of the British Army in 1939. And they're in trouble. Here's some good parachute pictures, paratroopers. Okay. So Churchill, the problem with DunKirk, guys, is that there's no good ports. There's one port you can use, but the rest is just beach. So if you bring in a big ship onto the beach to get these soldiers off the beach, what's going to happen to the ship? It's going to get beached. You're not going to be able to pull it out. And if you start bringing your Navy in there, who's going to destroy your Navy? The Luftwaffe is going to destroy your Navy. So Churchill's faced with a very difficult decision here. What do I do about all these French and British troops here? If I bring my Navy in here, I risk losing my Navy, and then we're done. We're in trouble. I mean, we're already in trouble. France just surrendered. Now, the narrowest point between the continent and the island is at Calais, Pas de Calais, and there's a city called Dover. It's about 20 miles. On a clear day, guys, you can stand at Calais and look across the English Channel and see the white cliffs of England. On a clear day, which is usually not clear there. Okay? The Channel is notorious for bad weather. Okay? And a lot of rain in England, period, right? So, guys, DunKirk is even further away. You're not going to swim across there. You can swim across Calais if you're like one of the best swimmers in the world. It's been done like twice. People swam across the channel. Fast currents. I mean, you got the North Sea, the Atlantic, you got currents coming through there, bad weather. It's a crazy thing to do to try to swim 20 miles across the English Channel. It's been done. But soldiers aren't going to swim from Dunkirk. So Churchill calls on you got to go? You go when you got to go. Don't wait for me. I don't want to make you late. Good luck.
Thank you.
Break a leg.
Thank you.
Churchill's going to call on every British citizen that has a boat, any kind of boat, tugboat, ski boat, pleasure yacht, sailboats, any kind of boat, rowboats. Get them to the coast. Get them to the coast now. And we're going to drag these small boats across the channel, and we're going to try and pluck these men off the beach. Okay? This becomes known as the miracle of Dunkirk. Now, for 5 days, fishing boats, yachts, tugs, other little boats braved bombs and strafing runs by the Luftwaffe to rescue 200,000 British troops and 140,000 French troops. Okay? The movie doesn't do this full justice, but it's still a good movie. Now, you can see some of the boats here that they drug across the channel. And then this is from like a movie, so that's not a real picture. This is a real picture. So you can see explosions going off in the background. The British and French troops were literally driving their vehicles onto the beach. Okay, they're going to leave behind almost 2,500 guns. And I don't mean like rifles, guys. I'm talking about artillery pieces. I mean, this is like a lot of what the British Army has is going to be left on that beach. 84,000. But what won't be left on that beach is 200,000 British soldiers. They're going to be saved, okay, to fight another day. You know what I mean? If they lose these men, they lose what experience they have of experienced soldiers, okay, and take a huge hit. So, like, you see this rowboat here, you got guys swimming out to this bigger vessel. Now, the movie shows you there's one dock. They call it the mole, okay? But, guys, if you bring big ships in there and they sink them at the mole, that dock is useless. You know, so they can't bring the big ships in there. And so they're going to have to ferry people across. It's quite extraordinary, guys. Okay, Churchill starts giving speeches, all right, on the radio. And I'll play some of these for you guys. And they're filled with like glory and just history and what the British are up against and how we're going to continue to fight. We're never going to surrender, okay? And boy, people are going to want to surrender. Once the Luftwaffe starts dropping bombs on Britain, day and night, they're going to want to surrender. Churchill will not allow it. Okay? Have any of you guys ever seen the movie The King's Speech? Okay, this is fabulous. Okay. The king at the time, this is Elizabeth's father, right? Queen Elizabeth that just died. Her father. I think it's Philip. Don't quote me on that. You want the king to like address the British people and say, look, we're going to stand, we're going to fight, we're going to win, right? But the king is a stutterer. He stutters. He can't give that speech. And people dearly want him to hear from their king. And he can't. You can't put that guy on the radio that's stuttering. So this movie is fantastic. It's about bringing in like speech pathologists and so forth, trying to help the king get over the stuttering problem. Okay, and you got all these like people with doctorates, the best in the country, and none of them can help. And so they turn to this quack, like this guy, like he doesn't have any degrees, but he works with people with stuttering problems. Okay, and this is where the movie just turns hilarious, because his method of getting people to stop stuttering is to get them to scream, to yell, to cuss, like get angry and just start spewing cuss words. And so he has the King of England doing this. They're all prim and proper, these people, right? And so it's hilarious, and it's based on a true story. So this guy helps the king, and eventually he's able to give this speech. Okay, and it's fantastic. Okay, guys, take your girlfriend to see it. It's a good chick flick too, but it's great with history. Okay? No offense, I don't. It's not the Hallmark Channel. Okay, but it's fantastic. Okay, so check that movie out. You get a couple hours. You won't regret it. Okay, it's a little more of an not adult movie like somebody that's kids aren't going to enjoy it, but you guys will, okay? Especially after kind of going through this story. Okay, so anyhow, this is fantastic. Okay, this is for the British, the miracle of Dunkirk. It becomes a rallying cry for the British. During the war, it's like let's get him back for Dunkirk type of thing. I know my British accent's not very good, but I tried. Okay. So what happens to the French? The French surrender. Now, this is a very cruel political cartoon about French Homeland Security. I know it's mean, okay, but they bring it on themselves. Okay. Now, we are not coming back across this channel for 4 years. Okay. Now, the next thing for the Germans is to knock Britain out of the war. That is called Operation Sea Lion. There's 3 phases to the battle. First phase is to achieve air superiority over the English Channel and southern England. The Germans will not complete phase 1. Okay, as we will learn on Monday in the Battle of Britain. Okay, so the Germans are going to have to stay here. They're going to have to occupy this part of France. Okay, unlike Denmark, they're going to have to leave a lot more troops here because they've got to fortify this coastline in case the British or the Americans, once they get in, right? Once we get in, okay? So they're going to occupy this part. The southern part of France will become known as Vichy France, okay? This is where they will install a puppet government. So the French will stay in charge of things and run things, and the Germans will just make sure they're doing the things they want them to do. You following me? Now, think about this, though. The French is a colonial empire. Think about French Indochina, which is, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia today. Think about French Morocco, French Algiers in North Africa, or other African nations that the French control. What happens to these colonies? Well, they become puppets too. So I mentioned the movie Casablanca the other day, I think, in here. Guys, you don't understand Casablanca unless you understand that the French are in charge, but the Germans are really there telling them what to do in Morocco. Okay, so it's kind of a unique place. Casablanca it's along the northern coast of North Africa here. Okay, Casablanca's right here on the coast. Okay, and so this becomes a point where a lot of people are trying to flee the war in Europe. Will go to Casablanca to try and get safe passage to anywhere else. Okay, so that's the backdrop of the movie Casablanca, which I do recommend. It's black and white and it's not real exciting, but the story is excellent. Okay, so one other big problem here. You guys remember the 5-Power Treaty that limited the size of navies? U.S. Great Britain, France, Italy, and Japan. Which was the first country to violate the five-power treaty? France. Because they were afraid of Mussolini. Okay? Well, France has a formidable navy. It's one of the best in the world, guys. What happens if that navy falls in the hands of the Germans? Now the Germans have a navy that's stronger than the British. Because the Royal Navy was the strongest in the world. Ours will become the strongest in the world during World War II. Okay. But the British have the best navy in the world. Dude, what's going to happen with the French Navy? So Churchill, as de Gaulle and the French are starting to surrender, he's like, listen, you need to sail your navy into British harbors. Now, that could be anywhere. That could be Canada. It could be South Africa. It could be India. It could be Morocco. You can sail your ships into any British harbor. Okay? Not Morocco, sorry. Egypt. Okay. So, if you're a French captain of a French destroyer, that's your ship with your men. Who's going to win this war? France just fell in 2 weeks. Who's going to win? Are the British going to defeat the Germans? No. There's no way the British can defeat the Germans. So if you're a French captain of a French ship, you're thinking to yourself, well, if I go to the Germans and I turn myself over to them, I might even be able to keep my command of my ship and save my men. If I go with the British, there's a chance we're all going to die. Maybe I'll just go with the Germans. And some of them did. Some of them sailed their navies their fleets into British harbors. The ones that didn't, there were some in the Mediterranean down here. Okay? Churchill sent 2 destroyers into the Mediterranean, approached the French vessels, and said, follow us out of the Mediterranean to Britain. They refused. They asked again. Refused. Churchill made a very difficult decision. He told them to sink the French fleet, with French sailors on board. Just a couple days previous, these were allies. And now Churchill is destroying the French fleet. This is a brutal decision. And many French still have not forgiven the British for this. Okay? But I want to show you this, guys. The British are in trouble. Look at this map. Spain has fallen to the fascists. Italy is fascist. Who's going to come help the British? Who's coming to help? The Irish? I mean, nothing against the Irish, but that's not going to do it. You follow me? The British have their backs to the wall. The easiest thing for the British to do here is to surrender. The hardest thing to do is to fight. Okay? And that's why I'm such a big fan of Churchill. Okay? I mean, they have their backs to the wall. And we're not getting involved. The United States. Churchill is begging Roosevelt, you understand, you need to get into this war. We need Western civilization is at stake. Nope. Nope. Now we're going to start sending more and more supplies, okay? But Churchill has to make these tough calls, okay? So tomorrow, we're going to come back across the pond and talk about the development of air power in the United States, the 20s and 30s, more American aviation history, okay? And then on Monday, and I may start on it tomorrow, we'll start the Battle of Britain, okay? Now, I've written several papers on the Battle of Britain from different perspectives and know way too much information about this. I'm going to share quite a bit of it with you. That's okay. 48 million people surrounded on their own have to survive. How do they do it? guy. That's what the story's about. Cool? Are you excited? I'm excited. All right. Conferences tonight. Fun.